what kind of prospects were there for Timothy? I mentioned this earlier, but I want to think about it for a minute. Instead of following Paul into the stinking dungeon, where, they're not even converting anybody to Christ at this point. They're just in a dungeon. Instead of that, what could they have done with their lives? Instead of that, Timothy could have moved home or moved to some other well-connected Roman city. Maybe where there were Christians. He could have served Christ there too, couldn't he? He could have had a really good job, made a lot of money in the Roman government, been an official, had a nice house, provided his house to the local church, and given money to the poor. He could have had a great life and followed and served Jesus. Couldn't he have done both? What's the answer? Yes, the answer is yes, he could have. And it wouldn't even have been wrong in a certain sense. But he knew that what God was calling him to at that moment was not that. What God was calling him to was to follow Paul around. What God was calling him to, he could see from the love that God had placed in him for Paul and for some of these churches that he had met, little tiny churches that were attacked by everyone around them. Because of that love that God had placed in him, he knew that God was calling him to be right where he was. To be right in the flash mob that's trying to stone them, to be right in the hard situations where it seems like they can never succeed, to be right in the stinking dungeon. That's where God had called him. He chose that. He chose that instead of the other kind of life he could have had. He chose it. Epaphroditus too. What kind of lives could these guys have had? Why? Why would they choose it? Because, as we'll see next week, everything they could have gained, they considered it like garbage.